Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, April the 2nd, 2024. Yesterday I looked at the moon in Capricorn and what it might mean, and I looked at some example charts of famous and infamous people with this placement, and there were a couple of suggestions that I was being overly negative about what it means to have moon in Capricorn. Well, I suppose the first thing to say about moon in Capricorn is that moon in Capricorn is in its detriment. Moon rules Cancer, therefore it's in its detriment in Capricorn. This is perhaps a particular issue for daytime charts because the moon is ruler of the earth signs, the earthy triplicity, by night, at least according to the table of essential dignities given by William Lilly in his book Christian Astrology, that 17th century textbook. I know there are other views of triplicity rulerships. And another point to make is, that all things being equal, it is one of the worst signs to have one's moon in, aside from Scorpio. Having said that, lots of people have moon in Capricorn, and it's not a problem, and it's not a big deal. It's not experienced necessarily as being bad at all. And there might be an issue with talking about placements in a good and a bad sense, and everyone's got a moon and everyone has to live with their moon. Now, as far as my coverage of a moon in Capricorn is concerned, the bulk of it was me looking at example charts, and of course these are charts that I find interesting, charts that I want to talk about. So in terms of what I find interesting, I find the horoscopes of Nazis interesting. I like to look at them. I don't know. It's just me. I suppose I've always been interested in Second World War history. So, sure enough, I think four of the charts I covered were charts of people associated with Nazi Germany. So, not surprisingly, that Moon in Capricorn, if you looked at it from that perspective, seemed a bit negative. And there were other charts of people with moon in Capricorn who I understand were not particularly positive. But when you're dealing with famous people and infamous people, you're dealing with, to an extent, exaggerations of what it actually means to have moon in Capricorn. And for example, so it's not just the fact that it's my own subjective sample of people I find interesting who have moon in Capricorn. It's also the fact that you're dealing with exaggerated features. You take something relatively harmless and you blow it out of all proportion. And so it might seem that I'm being very negative about it, what it means in general to have moon in Capricorn. I know, or have known pretty well, a fair amount of people with moon in Capricorn. They're perfectly pleasant people using their moon in Capricorn very well. But these are, if you like, ordinary people, not particularly famous, and that's how it's manifesting. And when you're a famous person, it's not just that your features are exaggerated. Many famous people, in my opinion, particularly if they're involved in politics, they are almost like instruments of the cosmos. As soon as you get involved with politics, you become an instrument of the universe, and you actually have less and less free will. I don't know, that's perhaps my particular view, might sound a bit controversial, but the more power you have, ironically, the less power you have, because you become an instrument of collective destiny. And so maybe your planetary positions become, almost robotic. You just have to, you do what you do and you can't help yourself. But so that's my position on me being overly negative about moon in Capricorn in terms of what it means for people who are not in positions of great power, there's absolutely nothing wrong with having moon in Capricorn. Indeed, there are some advantages in having moon in Capricorn. Moon in Capricorn does have the ability to look after itself, for example, and that is something to be applauded. And another point to make is that there is actually an intrinsic problem about looking at one feature in a chart. I mean, that is how one has to learn astrology, and one tends to sort of look at one feature in a chart. One really can't help oneself doing it, but you can't really look at one feature in a chart in isolation. You have to look at the whole chart as a whole. You have to, I mean, sorry, that whole as a whole, but you have to look at the unified chart and see where particular planets fit in. So there is always a problem about taking one feature of a chart and just concentrating on that and nothing else. So I hope I've explained myself there. In terms of what I want to talk about today, I want to talk about my country of birth, the United Kingdom, England, and I want to consider the possibility that England maybe is cursed, that things are going wrong with Britain, in quite a major way as far as I can see. I mean, they're going wrong with a lot of other countries, but I'm focused on Britain, perhaps because I'm a British citizen, because I grew up in Britain. Okay, that's not where I am right now. But I wanted to look at some charts that might be relevant to Britain to try to understand why things are going so wrong with the country, and perhaps even make a suggestion about why they're going things wrong with the country. When I will be exercising a certain amount of subjectivity in terms of my view. Well, what has Britain been doing that has made things so bad for itself? What are its mistakes been? So that's the main thing I'm going to talk about. For example, I'm going to look at Rishi Sunak's chart. I'm going to look at Keir Starmer's chart. I'm going to look at the chart of the 2020 Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. I think that chart with Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is critical to understanding what is going on in the United Kingdom. But before I do all that, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, April the 2nd, 2024. Top right, we have got various people connected with Britain. You can see Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, Boris, and King Charles. Oh, and there's Meghan. I think she's got a bit part to play in this whole drama. Okay, so if you look at the positions of the planets today, you will see that the moon is still in Capricorn. The moon was in Capricorn yesterday and still there. So we can still say the usual stuff about the moon in Capricorn. When the moon is in Capricorn, all things being equal, we tend to look after ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with looking after ourselves. And there's a certain amount of selfishness there. And we're thinking about our money. We're thinking about the interests of our family. That is a great thing about moon in Capricorn. One can be negative about moon in Capricorn, but moon in Capricorn doesn't just look after itself. It looks after its family and the people really close to it. So, if you've got family members of moon in Capricorn, you can be part of the system that they are trying to look after. And so I've got a sibling with moon in Capricorn. Moon in Capricorn in certain situations is very protective of me, particularly if I'm being criticised. I do remember one incident decades ago. I'm not going to go into details, but I remember that loyalty with moon in Capricorn that you can have if you happen to be a member of the moon in Capricorn's family. So we shouldn't, we shouldn't be too negative about moon in Capricorn. Aside from that, the moon in Capricorn is making a trine to Jupiter in Taurus and Uranus in Taurus. So it's making a trine to the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. That does make moon in Capricorn a little more excitable than usual. Although this trine is in earth signs, it's not like having a trine in fire signs. It still is fairly restrained. So moon trine Jupiter in Taurus can be about taking action to improve one's material situation. It might be the potential for having a piece of luck, especially when you throw in the Uranus as well. Moon trine Uranus can really make things happen. There can be sudden events, but not sudden events as in thunderbolts. It's not like that. That moon trine Uranus, remember, it's not in fire signs. And it may also relate to the way we respond to the world around us with moon trine Uranus. Our response can be a bit excitable. Emotionally, we might feel that we have to respond to something in a way that is quite noticeable, but without being explosive. Remember, it's moon trine Uranus, it's not moon square Uranus. If it was moon square Uranus, that could be quite explosive and difficult and stressful. Moon trine Uranus, something happens sort of more easily. We just express ourselves. So that's the trines between the moon on one hand and Jupiter and Uranus on the other. We should also be aware of the fact that the moon is making a square to the sun in Aries. So moon in Capricorn square sun in Aries. That's more if you are in Europe and Asia, Australia, New Zealand. I think if you're in the Americas, I don't think you're going to feel that square so much. But the moon in Capricorn is about the contradiction, isn't there, between moon in Capricorn, sun in Aries. Sun in Aries wants to take action. Moon in Aries is saying, moon in Capricorn is saying, hold on, is this really the thing you want to do? Because there might be consequences, there might be material consequences. So moon square sun might be about a little bit of frustration. There are things we want to do, but we're aware of the consequences of these things we want to do. And we may have to make a decision, or we may have to moderate what we're doing. We can't take the full initiative we want to take, because if we were to do so, it might undermine our financial self-interest. So that is one way of looking at moon square the sun. Another aspect today, which is worthy of note, is a semi-sextile between Mercury and Venus. Now, semi-sextiles are often labelled as a G. I think if you've got this, for example, I've got these Raphael's ephemeris, and you look at the back, and it goes through all of these. It goes through all the aspects, and it has big B's, big G's. Then the semi-sextile, it gives a little g, and I think what that means is it's a sort of a minor aspect that's good. I would disagree with that analysis. I don't think that the semi-sextile is a fortunate aspect. It's stressful. The reason it is stressful is because you're dealing with two planets in adjacent signs, and adjacent signs are often very different in nature. So you have got, in this case, you've got Venus in Pisces, semi-sextile Mercury in Aries. Venus in Pisces, I suppose you could say Venus is exalted, it wants to get close to people, it wants to be harmonious, and then Mercury in Aries wants to say what's on its mind. It wants to be very clear about its opinions. So Mercury semi-sextile Venus may be about wanting to say things, but knowing that if we were to say them, we would cause a certain amount of upset, or saying the wrong things, or thinking so much that our feelings of harmony are disrupted. It's not that one is good and one is bad, Mercury plays Venus. It's that somehow the two planets have to be integrated, if at all possible, and that's quite difficult. So with Venus in Pisces, we are trying very hard to be nice, to be harmonious, but our thoughts and our words are disrupting it. But maybe our thoughts and our words are disrupting it with good reason. Mercury is not the bad guy here. Mercury is trying to explain that we need to be impulsive, we need to be clear. Look at it from the other point of view. Mercury wants to say what's on its mind, but just worrying about other people and their reactions may prevent Mercury from expressing itself. So somehow we have to bring the energies of Mercury and Venus together. And at the same time as this, we see a decile between Mars and Pluto. Mars and Pluto are around 36 degrees apart. Deciles are about the attempt to create a particular style. Attempt. It can be hard work. Mars and Pluto is about the desire for control. Many of us are trying hard to show a controlling style. It may not be us, it may be someone else. You may notice that other people are throwing their weight around, but how sincere are they? How much can they really carry it through? So we could be seeing some paper tigers, people claiming to be in a strong position, trying to give the impression that they're powerful players, but as soon as you challenge them, they may not be quite as powerful as their appearances suggest. So far I've been looking at the positions of the planets from a geocentric perspective. Now what I want to do quickly now is just look at the heliocentric position. So I'm not suggesting that I'm going to see anything dramatic, but it's always a good idea to put the sun at the center of the solar system, where it properly is. The planets do go around the sun, and that includes the Earth. And here is the heliocentric position of the planets. There's not a great deal going on. You can see that the Earth is at 13 Libra, moving towards an opposition of Chiron, but that's quite a way away. But one thing is that the Earth is trine Mars. That's probably the most important thing to notice today. Earth in Libra, trine Mars in Aquarius. That could be quite fortunate for us on a personal level, because Earth trine Mars may allow us to assert ourselves, to make our position clear, especially when dealing with the world around us. On a more general level, moving beyond the individual to the collective, Earth trine Mars could be a little dangerous. Heliocentric trines are not necessarily harmonious. They can just represent the fact that Earth, we are living on Earth, trine Mars. Mars is a planet of aggression and anger. That's what can come down here. That's what we can experience down here on planet Earth. So Earth trine Mars may represent a bit of aggravation and anger, and we need to look carefully at what's going on in war zones. So that's the heliocentric position of planets. Earth trine Mars, that is the main message. So going back to the heliocentric positions, I now want to look at what's going on today astrologically from a perspective of the 12 signs. So these are my readings for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, April the 2nd, 2024. Right, Tuesday, April the 2nd, 2024. Aries. You seem to have a need to assert yourself. It seems to be really important today. After all, Mars is decile Pluto. That means that Mars and Pluto are approximately 36 degrees apart. You want to create a style for yourself which is assertive. You want to make it absolutely clear to everyone around you that you are in control. I am not saying that's a bad thing, but you do have to be careful about where you are asserting yourself. You can't just assert yourself where you like, I don't think, because if you were to do that, you might be caught out. In other words, you may not have the energy to actually see it through. So if you want to give the impression that you are a big power player, that you want to create a transformation around you through the force of your personality, and you feel that's an important thing to do, you may be caught out if you're in an area that you fundamentally don't have enough power in. So don't overestimate your abilities. And if you are going to throw your weight around, then choose areas where you naturally have authority and knowledge. You know, I'm not being negative about it. I must emphasize this. I think that this Mars decile Pluto can actually be very useful, but you do need to focus it. Focus on the targets that matter. If there's one particular area where you really feel that you need to make an impression that's important to you, then yes, you can really achieve something. But you have to be properly prepared, and you have to make sure it's an area that you're comfortable with, where you can deal with potential challenges. Aside from that, Aries, we're in a situation where the Sun is in your sign. The Sun has been going through Aries for some time, and the Moon is in Capricorn. I think that this is quite a good situation, provided you handle it correctly. With the Sun in Aries, clearly this is your time. If you're looking at these 12 sign forecasts from a perspective of your sun sign, it is of course your birthday month. And it is a time when you have a lot of power and a lot of control. But with the Moon in Capricorn, you need to get the balance right. Moon in Capricorn is a more cautious energy, but Moon in Capricorn is going through a high-profile sector of your chart. It is about being ambitious, and it's also about being carefully ambitious. you can't just be totally impulsive. You know that. You want to be impulsive, perhaps. You want results. Sun in Aries. You're an Aries. You're an Aries, and the Sun is currently moving through Aries. But the Moon in Capricorn urges you to just be a little more restrained. It's not enough just to get short-term results. They might just be a flash in the pan. They need to be lasting, and you need to think about building things up, and that requires a bit of responsibility, I think. At least that's what Moon in Capricorn is asking of you. And I think that if you recognize that, you should be okay. Finishing up with relationships, you may find that some of the people close to you are struggling with words. There are things they want to say, but for some reason they're finding it difficult to say, to get the words out. And you need to understand that. You need to give the people close to you the space to express themselves. Maybe they feel they can't say things. Maybe it's because of you they can't say things. Or it may just maybe some other factor. And so what you have to do is give people the space and make it quite clear that you're there to listen. And I think that is something you can do, and I think you'll be helped perhaps by the fact that the Moon is moving through Capricorn. I think the Moon in Capricorn may just slow you down a little, and as a result you can give yourself and other people the space in which to communicate. Taurus, you feel a bit conflicted today because you're aware that a lot of people aren't interested in what you've got to say, or at least you might feel that way. And you might be very concerned that if you were to say what's on your mind, it might cause upset, or you might get a negative reaction. And all this is because Mercury is making a semi-sextile to Venus. Venus is your ruler, but it's making a semi-sextile to Venus. Venus and Mercury are 30 degrees apart. And somehow you have to bring it all together. You do have something to say. And it may be quite important what you've got to say. But you are concerned, yes, if you were to say what's on your mind, you might get a negative reaction. So what do? I think it is important that if you do have something to say, you don't delay. I don't think postponement is an option, of course. Taurians can actually cause a lot of trouble by saying the obvious. There is actually a blunt side to Taurus. I won't say tactless, I'll say blunt. Because Taurians, they look at the world as it is. They make observations about the world as they see it, and they can be very blunt about it. And if you are blunt, then you may indeed get a negative reaction. And perhaps this is what this semi-sextile between Mercury and Venus is all about. I mean, from a constructive point of view, it's asking you not to be blunt. It's telling you, yes, you've certainly got something to communicate, but don't just say it in a blunt way. Think about how you put the words together. And just think about what kind of impression you're having. And I'm not trying to make you self-conscious. I'm just suggesting that you might want to make some effort to craft your words. And craft is an important word here because Mercury and Venus as a pair are actually very talented. They are about artistic ability, often connected with art and sculpture, and can be business ability, entrepreneurial ability. Yeah, a very talented pair. And so your challenge, Taurus, is to bring together Mercury and Venus and come over as a talented, thoughtful and sensitive person. Yes, you can do it, but I'm just saying it may not be 100% easy. So in a way, perhaps that's your homework for the day, working out how to put the words together in such a way that you don't just cause a good impression, but you actually are impressive, because I think you can do it. And I think that you're helped by the fact that the moon is in Capricorn and it is trine Jupiter in Taurus. That's great, really. Jupiter's in Taurus. It's been in Taurus since, I think, May of last year. It's been in Taurus for nearly a year now. But while Jupiter has been in Taurus, I think you have been finding your groove. You've been finding out what you're good at. You've been finding out where you can, the directions in which you can expand into. And Moon trine Jupiter is allowing you to bring that all out into the open today. And I think it really can be a very positive and expansive day. Moon is not just trine Jupiter, it's also trine Uranus. Moon is in Capricorn, which from a Taurian perspective, Moon in Capricorn is actually quite a forward-thinking placement. It might have a material edge, thinking perhaps about new ways of making and saving money. That is possible. It can be quite inventive in a material sense, and with Moon trine Jupiter, you can really put it all together, and you can really be optimistic. And your optimism is not just about yourself, but it's also about the people you're coming into contact with, and that perhaps feeds back into this Mercury-Venus semi-sextile I was talking about. Once you find the right words, you really will be very impressive. Gemini. Okay, you now know for sure that Mercury is retrograde. I have to say this. Mercury is your ruler, and depending on your time zone, Mercury might have gone retrograde yesterday, might have gone retrograde today, but now for sure Mercury is retrograde. And many Geminis may recognize that now is not the time for putting plans into action, particularly serious plans. Plans that really are critical, but which don't have to be done tomorrow. Mercury doesn't go direct until the end of the month. So now you are completely familiar with that. And this point may be underlined by the fact that Mercury is now semi-sextile Venus. Mercury is in Aries. So for many Geminis, there are things they want to say. Mercury in Aries is about communicating in a forthright way. But Mercury is semi-sextile Venus. Venus is the planet of relationships. It's also a planet connected with important people, important for you in terms of how you run your life, especially if you happen to be working. It might be people it might be employers, for example, or authority figures, people who you want to keep in their good book. You want to be in their good books. Really, You don't really want to offend them. And with Mercury sextile Venus, Mercury semi-sextile Venus, you know that you actually have to hold back. Some of the things that you want to say can't be said, at least not now, because you might give the wrong impression. You might cause offence. Yes, that is possible. And yeah, Geminis can always cause offence. Gemini is a very verbal sign, and you could easily say things that are a little upsetting just without even thinking about it. And there's also the question of your own thoughts. Mercury in Aries is about the way you're thinking, and you may just be concerned about the social dimension, just other people and other people's attitudes, and just the vibes they're giving off may in some way interfere with your thought processes. Geminis can actually be quite dismissive of the social dimension. Let's stick to the facts. People's emotions are not really part of the facts. Maybe I'm projecting there because I'm a Gemini, but you are certainly aware of that. And with Mercury semi-sextile Venus, you're really looking for the right way to say what you want to say, and it's going to be hard, especially I think if you are working today. I suppose I have to say that if you notice something in a business or working perspective and you want to say it, then think carefully about it, and probably, if in doubt, don't say it, unless of course that it is something to be said. But on a positive note, this Mercury semi-sextile Venus is about talent. I was telling that to Taurus just now. Today it may be especially about business talent, or financial talent. That's because Venus is in Pisces, and from a Gemini perspective, Pisces can be a quite business-orientated sign. So Venus is in Pisces, it's exalted in Pisces, it's semi-sextile Mercury. So the challenge here is to bring ideas together, ideas that relate to business and career. And I suppose the question is, how can you be successful, even more successful, but at the same time be able to integrate the human dimension? Having said all that, I think that many Geminis are not really going to be in the mood for saying a great deal. There's a lot going on today on a fairly private level. Moon is trine Jupiter. Moon in Capricorn, trine Jupiter in Taurus. That's a pleasant influence, but from a Gemini perspective, Capricorn and Taurus are signs that are quite introspective and are quite private. And so a lot of the action could be in your own brain. You're thinking about things, you're working things through, you're noticing things as well. Yeah, give yourself the opportunity to notice. Geminis can sometimes not notice things, but today I think you will be noticing things which you don't normally notice. Perhaps material details, surface details which tell you a lot about things going on deep down. For example, look at other people. look at their mannerisms, look at what they're saying, look at what they're not saying, look at their appearance. You notice these things, and you're also able to make some connections. By looking at a surface appearance, you might actually understand what is going on deep down. And in that sense, Gemini, you may be quite an effective psychologist today. That doesn't mean you have to interact with people in a sort of psychotherapeutic way. I suppose you might, but you don't have to. It's just about making observations, and if you give yourself the time and the space, you're going to have a much better understanding of how the people around you are working and functioning psychologically. And you don't actually have to know people very well to be able to have that understanding. Relative strangers, you just look at their behavior, look at their body language, and that will give you an insight into the kind of people they are, and also what might be bothering them right now. Cancer. The moon continues moving through Capricorn, and from a Cancerian perspective, the sign Capricorn is very much about other people. You can't help but notice that other people are there and that they are having an influence on you. And that can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. But today I would have probably said it is more of a good thing, because the moon is trine Jupiter. Moon trine Jupiter means that you can benefit from people. Moon trine Jupiter is also good for Cancer in general. I mean, the moon is your ruler, and so if it's trine Jupiter, the planet of good fortune, you should be able to benefit. You're feeling more comfortable, you're feeling relatively lucky, and I think in most cases things are likely to go your way, and they might go your way quite unexpectedly. After all, the moon is trine Uranus. Uranus, a planet of earthquakes, revolutions, things happening that you weren't expecting. But that's good. And the moon is, because it's going through Capricorn, your opposite sign, I think that you can be lucky through other people. Most people, from your subjective perspective, are a force for good. They can make things work for you. So give people a chance. Okay, you might be somewhat suspicious in the first instance, not entirely trusting, but if you give people a chance to work their magic, then I think that you might be pleasantly surprised. So consider all of the people around you and all of the people who you might be coming into contact with today, and see how they can help you. And if there's something you need, something you want to perhaps ask for, I don't think you should be afraid of asking for it, because you'll know how to phrase a request, because the moon is trine Jupiter. Moon is trine Uranus as well. So you'll know how to ask for things, and your sensitivity as a Cancerian is going to help you. In many cases, it's just simply about asking for things in such a way that maybe it seems to be in the other person's interests as well as your interests to grant the favour. So that's today. I think today, Cancer, if you go about things in the right way, I think things can really work well for you. And just don't forget the people around you. They can be extremely helpful. Leo, you continue to be in a state of mind where you feel that you have to be careful, cautious, and well organized. And that's okay. After all, the moon is in Capricorn. When the moon is in Capricorn, you really do want things to be in the right place. And if something is in the wrong place, that's gonna mess you up. So, a bit boring that, but I think it is necessary. But it's not the whole story. I think that today Leos can actually be quite assertive. You can express yourself very well. You can communicate with the wider world with a certain amount of power and authority, and I do think that people are going to take you seriously, and you are helped by the fact that the moon is trine Jupiter. This trine between the moon and Jupiter is quite materialistic. It is thinking about its own financial and material interests. After all, the moon is in Capricorn and Jupiter is in Taurus. These are earth signs. But that Jupiter in Taurus is particularly relevant to Leos, because from a Leo perspective, Jupiter is in a sign that is really quite high profile, can be career orientated. So moon trine Jupiter is going to allow you to get things together in a career and working sense. Now, I understand that it's just certainly in Europe, you're just coming back from Monday. Monday was a bank holiday. Yeah, Monday's usually a holiday in Europe. Probably other parts of the world as well. Not in America, not in the Americas, but it's maybe the beginning of a week, depending on where you are. But beginning of a week, it may be, but people are not quite in the mood. They're not quite ready to get down to work and whatever. But Leo, if you're working, you do need to hit the ground running, or at least you can benefit if you can be the one who hits the ground running because of this moon trine Jupiter. It's not that you're being impulsive or doing anything crazy. It's just that you have a pretty clear idea about the way things should be running. As I said right at the beginning of this piece on Leo, you are looking for good organization, and that's not just in your own life, it's in other people's life. And again, if you are working or in some organizational setting, then yes, I think that you can be very effective. So it is a time when you can really take advantage of everything that's on offer, but you have to be the one taking the initiative. And initiative is important to you. The sun is moving through Aries. Sun is your ruler. It's moving through Aries. It's sort of in the middle of Aries. And you might, though, feel that although you want to take the initiative, you can't take the initiative because there are things that still need to be done. And I think that view, either or, you can't do things because things are not properly organized. Either it's not even either or. You can't do things because things aren't properly organized. But I suppose the either or is if you were to take the initiative, if you were to do what you wanted to do, then you'd be allowing things to revert into chaos. I think that is an incorrect approach. you can do both at the same time, and you can actually take the initiative and take action, not just in making fast progress in the world out there, but in terms of also organizing the world in which you're functioning. So in that sense, Leo, I think that it can be a very useful day, and I think that you can accomplish a great deal. So overall, I'd have to say, well, make the most of it. Virgo. As I was saying to Gemini, Mercury is now definitely retrograde. We just have to remember that. Virgo, at least the stereotypical Virgo, likes things to be well organized, likes things to be properly planned, and now Mercury is retrograde. Well, you have to make a special effort to make sure that everything really is well organized and that people have actually understood what is happening, and you shouldn't leave things to chance. Though I suppose it could be said that Mercury in the Mercury retrograde effect, the idea that things go wrong when Mercury goes retrograde, you could say, well, it maybe only affects people who are into astrology. The people who don't notice it's into astrology don't have to worry about Mercury being retrograde, because actually Mercury is retrograde a lot of the time. And maybe it affects Virgos, perhaps because Virgos know that Mercury is retrograde. Virgos who are into astrology may be particularly aware when Mercury is retrograde. So you could be, if you want to be completely skeptical about the thing, say, well, the Mercury retrograde effect is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what I'm saying, Virgo, is that if you are really concerned about Mercury being retrograde, don't be too concerned. Life does go on when Mercury is retrograde. And yes, said Mercury is retrograde a lot. It's not a rare event, Mercury going retrograde. And people do accomplish a great deal when Mercury is retrograde. People set up successful businesses when Mercury is retrograde. I'm sure if you do a statistical analysis of businesses and other ventures, looking at their start points, you'd probably find that Mercury retrograde isn't really such a big deal. Having said that, it's helpful to be aware of Mercury retrograde, not as a way to stop yourself doing anything, but also, but instead to basically protect yourself. So if you know that Mercury is retrograde, you can allow extra time to get to a particular location, or you can repeat yourself. So if you've asked someone to do something yesterday, you might want to give them a reminder. Because Mercury is retrograde, no harm in giving people reminders when Mercury is retrograde. It just makes things happen more easily, and it reduces the possibility of mistakes and misunderstandings and omissions. And Virgo, I don't want you to think that I'm being negative about today. Actually, I think today looks quite good. After all, the moon is making a trine to Jupiter. Moon in Capricorn, an earth sign, is making a trine to Jupiter in Jupiter's in Taurus, two earth signs. So Moon and Jupiter are making a triangular relationship to your sign, because your sign is Virgo. So your sign is Virgo, got Moon in Capricorn, and we've got Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus. So that makes things run quite smoothly, and it could make you the beneficiary of good fortune, provided you allow it all to happen. I think it's a day when you need to focus on what you can do, not what you cannot do. Don't get fixated on limitations, on all the reasons why you might not be able to do something. You need to consider possibilities, and you also need to be imaginative. There are many ways of doing things, many ways of getting to your destination. And just because one way seems to be blocked doesn't mean that another way, or even another way, can't be used. And if you put in a little bit of effort, Virgo, you'll start to realize that there are real possibilities out there. And you'll know whether it's a realistic possibility very quickly, because Moon trine Jupiter is about things moving easily. So you might be pushing on one door and it might be stuck. You push on another door. If it's the right door, it will start to open. And that's about you getting good results. And in the process, I think that you can benefit from other people, certain other people. I think you have to choose your company. The kind of person that you should be associating with today is the kind of person who has got a powerful imagination, someone who is not narrow-minded, someone who is all about possibilities, the kind of person that's going to encourage you to consider other possibilities. What you don't want to do is associate with people who are negative, who are always coming up with complaints and reasons why you shouldn't do something. No, you need to concentrate on optimistic people who are about putting forward possibilities for action, not reasons why you can't do something. But overall, a lot of energy today. I think that regardless of what I said about Mercury going retrograde, Moon trine Jupiter is the main aspect, and that trine between Moon and Jupiter directly benefits Virgo, your sign. Libra. It's perhaps another day when you may want to hold back a bit. You're just not fully in the mood for interacting with the world and its problems. And I don't think that's a problem. There are things you may feel you want to do in your own space, if you're at home, and you might be of the opinion that, the less you have to do, the less you have to go out, the better for yourself and the better for everyone. But it's important not to miss opportunities. There are opportunities today, but there are opportunities which may not be found in obvious places. The opportunities may be in places which are quite hidden, that you have to do a bit of research to uncover. And that might actually be a good reason why it might be a good idea to keep a fairly low profile, because you need space in order to find what you're looking for. And you are not disturbed by other people. You're thinking, you're reading, and slowly things start to become clear. And once things are clear, then you'll be in a position to take action. And one thing about today is that there is a semi-sextile aspect between Mercury and Venus. So Mercury is the planet of communication. Venus is your ruler. And in some ways, Libra, I get the picture with Venus in Pisces, of you trying to work something out, but at the same time you're getting bothered. There are disturbances. That is Mercury in Aries. Mercury in Aries, semi-sextile Venus in Pisces. Mercury in Aries can be the other. Someone trying to talk to you, someone wanting your attention, perhaps trying to talk to you maybe on the phone, and you're not interested. It's a disturbance. It's preventing you from getting where you want to go, and you feel that you need your own space in order to get things done, and you don't want to spend time listening to people. And I think you would be right to not want to be disturbed, but only up to a point. There are certain people that do need to be integrated into your life. You don't entirely want to do it, even though you're a Libran, and Libra is supposed to be quite a socially orientated sign. Even though you're a Libran, you don't really want to do it. You're a bit half-hearted about the whole thing. So what do? You get the balance right. You give people a bit of time, but not all of your time. You accept that some people can be helpful, but maybe most people are completely unhelpful. But you have to decide which people can be useful. And don't entirely underestimate your social skills. If there are people out there who you need to interact with, who you want to interact with, you can make a powerful impression. You can be dynamic, get in contact with someone, make it very clear what you want, and I think they'll listen to you. And they will take you seriously. And most importantly, you'll be able to stay in contact with someone. So that's the key point, staying in contact. And so you can take action today which allows you to stay in contact with important people who could be useful for you. And in a day or two's time, when the situation changes, when you feel better able to be out there and when you're feeling more sociable, you can take advantage of these contacts that you've been able to maintain. Scorpio. When I was talking about Scorpio yesterday, I was saying that Scorpio was, in the mood for talking. I was mentioning, I think, that Scorpio was really quite an effective communicator, even though Mercury is now retrograde. And I say the same thing, and possibly more so, because today the moon is making a trine aspect to Jupiter from a fairly sociable perspective as well, because the moon is in Capricorn, in a part of your horoscope that is very much about communication and messages, and it's making a trine to Jupiter, and Jupiter is in Taurus, and Taurus is your opposite sign. It's very much connected with other people. So moon trine Jupiter, if there's someone you've been meaning to talk to, even though Mercury is retrograde, you're going to be able to get in contact. Though perhaps with Mercury retrograde, you shouldn't worry too much about the details of what you're saying or what you're communicating. Yeah, if you worry about details, then yes, there could be misunderstandings, but the key point is that you are in contact with someone, that you're able to make contact, that you're able to communicate. But that's probably as far as it need go. Just being in contact with someone is enough. Then you can, pursue things further at a later stage. And I should say that I think that relationships should proceed pretty well today, and I'm confident that you're going to be able to impress your personality. People are going to be quite clear about what kind of person you are, and also I think what you want, because today, Scorpio, actually you are quite powerful. After all, Mars, your ruler, makes a decile to Pluto. The decile is what you are trying to create. Pluto is a planet that is, very often about power, creating transformations. That is something you can do. Okay, you do have to make a bit of an effort, and you have to be sure that you're working in an area that you are comfortable with. You can't just be powerful for the sake of it. Just say, oh, I want to be powerful. I want to transform the world, or my little part of the world, in a sort of unconnected, ungrounded way. No, it has to be real, and it does need passion. Passion is, of course, the key ingredient here. After all, you are a Scorpio. The Scorpio passion is so important. So it's not enough to want to be powerful without the passion. But if it's a situation where you can engage your passion, then I think that the Mars decile Pluto is really going to work, and you can create a very effective style which I think people will take very seriously, and they're likely to give way to you. And because they can pick up on your passion, they'll know that you're not someone to resist. I mean, Scorpios with a passion are in a way quite irresistible, aren't they? But Scorpios without a passion, I suppose it can happen. Well, who cares? So just make sure that the passion is there in terms of whatever you're trying to achieve. And of course, by definition, it's the things that you're most passionate about, and they're the things that really matter. And with Mars moving through Pisces, remember Mars is your ruler. With Mars moving through Pisces, you can really show that passion, and in many cases it's going to be a creative passion, something you want to do, something you want to create in the world out there. And I suppose it all starts with your private world, doesn't it? Firstly, you're creating with your feelings, and then I suppose with your thoughts, and then actually it starts to get created in the world out there. And that's something you can do. And it may be a case where you're creating something, and to begin with, you're not entirely confident. You may feel, oh, maybe it's a little bit fake, but your passion is there. And as you get results, your passion increases, and in the end, you get some really excellent results. So, Scorpio, I think you can be very powerful today, and you can achieve a great deal. And relationships mustn't be underestimated with that moon trine Jupiter. I think that you have the capacity to get close to people, get close to the people who matter, and at the same time, moon trine Jupiter, even though the moon is in Capricorn, moon trine Jupiter can be very generous, certainly emotionally generous. And I think that emotional generosity on your part can really improve relationships and make your various relationships, okay, it's not so many relationships, but key relationships, there's one or two key relationships in your life, they can become very satisfying. Sagittarius, you may feel that money continues to be important. I mean, that's the way it is. There's nothing wrong with focusing on money a little. You don't have to spend all day focusing on money, but the moon is in Capricorn, and from a Sagittarius perspective, Capricorn is a sign which is about money, and the moon is in Capricorn is trine Jupiter. Jupiter is, of course, your ruling planet. And so moon trine Jupiter does indicate that from a financial perspective, you can have a certain amount of good fortune. You can make things happen, and perhaps you can be at the right place at the right time with a little bit of preparation. I think you know what needs to be done, and with a bit of planning, I think you can organise things very well for yourself. And I know that sounds a little bit boring. Sagittarians, do like excitement traditionally, but you can't have excitement all day long. Sorry, not all day long, all year long. There are times when you need to focus on other things. And yes, if you can focus on material stuff, then I think today you can definitely benefit. But you may be a little wary of other people. I suppose part of it is the fact that Mercury is retrograde. With Mercury going retrograde, and this is the first full day with Mercury being retrograde, there may be a certain sense of disappointment. Not everyone is able to deliver in the way you expected, and you shouldn't be surprised if someone appears to be breaking a promise, or maybe goes back on an agreement, or seems less committed about something than they were a day or two ago. You shouldn't take it personally and regard it as an affront. You should just take the view, well, this is Mercury retrograde. This does happen when Mercury is retrograde. But nonetheless, there are people you need to come to some kind of accommodation with them, and it may be about dealing with people's desires. Everyone has desires, and there are people who have desires which are not entirely in accord with what you desire. So there may be a clash of desires here with Mercury semisextile Venus. You really want to do something, and someone else really wants to do something, and they don't fit. There seems to be a basic clash of approach, and so the question is, what do you do about it? Now, one approach might be to say, well, different people have different tastes, and so just go your separate ways. Alternatively, you shouldn't necessarily focus on surface details. It may be a situation where, to begin with, it appears that you and someone else have completely different priorities. But when you start to analyze the situation, if you're prepared to discuss the situation, if you can discuss the situation, it can't always be discussed. I mean, that may be the case, but if you can discuss the situation and have a constructive discussion, you may realize that your priorities and someone else's priorities are not quite as different as you thought. And it may, in the end, become clear that you and someone else actually have the same priorities, even though to begin with it appeared that you had completely different priorities. So the question is, to what extent can you dig deep down to realize that what appeared to be differences are in fact similarities? Yeah, it could be hard work getting to that level, but if you can't engage in that kind of discussion and you find that people are closed, that they don't want to talk about stuff, you can still consider the possibility that what you want and what someone else wants aren't necessarily 180 degrees apart. You may actually want the same thing. That is possible. But today, I think the most important thing today is to make sure that basic material details are all in order. And it may go further from that, because I think that if things are in order, you're creating a space where things can move at a material level, and you might also find materially you have a certain amount of luck, but it will be the kind of luck that you have created. It's not the kind of luck that just comes from nowhere. Capricorn. I think Capricorn, things seem to be running very smoothly today. After all, the moon is moving through your sign, moving through Capricorn, and it's making a trine to Jupiter. Moon trine Jupiter is a fortunate aspect. Moon is also making a trine to Uranus, because we've got a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. Okay, it's not an exact Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, but nonetheless, Moon is trine Jupiter and Uranus. So, Capricorn, things should be running pretty well for you, and at the same time, you can express yourself in the way you want to express yourself, in a way that is very creative, because you're creatively, I think you're on very good form at the moment. You have been, in some respects, from a creative perspective, you've been on good form for a long time, since May of last year. So pretty much for a year, you've been getting new insights into what you can do in the world and what you're good at. I think that is very clear. Okay, you might be in denial about it, but if you look at the situation and you look at what's happened over the last 11 months, you'll start to realize what you've accomplished, and you'll also see the insights you've had about what you can do. You now have a pretty good idea about where your talents lie. And today, with Moon trine Jupiter, it's a time when you can bring some of these abilities to bear, when you really can be creative in your own way. And it's not the kind of creativity that needs to be explained. It's also not the kind of creativity that is insane or disruptive. It's very solid, and it's about you, and it's about you really making things happen in a systematic way. You indicate to the world how you want things to turn out, and sure enough, they do turn out, and it all comes from the depths of who you are. You don't have to be out there in the world. You don't have to be in the bright lights. That's all completely unnecessary. Indeed, when you're in the trouble about being in the bright lights is that you have to very often compromise with other people. You have to do things their way. I mean, isn't that the key to being famous very often? famous people, the reason they're famous, the reason they're celebrities, is not because they're unique, but because they know how to follow. They know how to follow trends. They know how to fit into other people's images of what you're supposed to do. This is clearly not your world at the moment. You are doing things your way, and really today that is something you can achieve. And at the same time, people are going to like you. I mean, the people who matter are going to like you, and they're going to give you the support and appreciation that you need. If someone doesn't give you support and appreciation today, then really they weren't important and they weren't relevant. So it's only the important and relevant people who are going to give you appreciation. And I think that they will help you bring your abilities, I won't say out into the open, because it's not really about bringing things out into the open. It's just making yourself and what you can do clearer and more defined. And it's getting pretty defined already, because Jupiter has been in Taurus for nearly a year. And yeah, today is just another reminder of what you are able to achieve. Aquarius. I'm afraid the moon is still in Capricorn, and it shouldn't really be a problem that the moon is in Capricorn, because in a way the moon in Capricorn gives you more time. But I say afraid the moon is in Capricorn because perhaps you feel that you're ready to do something, you'd like to do something, but the world out there is just not being sufficiently supportive, and we might therefore need to think in terms of patience. There's nothing wrong with being patient. You're almost ready to get going on something, but not quite. And so today I would perhaps recommend that you engage in a little bit of preparation, and now might not be the time to reveal things. Mentally you're working away, you're thinking about what is possible, you'd like to talk to people, you'd like to discuss your ideas with people, but not today. Unless it's something really important. Because if you were to tell people, what was on your mind, then you might not get particularly good feedback. You might not get any feedback at all. But on a positive note, the moon in Capricorn is sextile Saturn. So Saturn is your ruler. Saturn rules Aquarius, remember. It's not Uranus. So with moon sextile Saturn, that indicates to me that there are useful things you can do. So it's not a wasted day. It may feel like a wasted day because it doesn't feel like you're accomplishing anything tangible, but actually you are accomplishing things, and in fact you are accomplishing tangible things which have real results. And if, for example, you can focus on money, that would be good. After all, Saturn, your ruler, is in Pisces, and from an Aquarian perspective, Saturn is in a sign which is very money orientated. So if you can work on that, that would be a good thing. And also work on the basis of facts rather than ideas. I understand that Aquarius is an idea-orientated sign, but if at the moment you had these big principles on which you were trying to run your life according to these big ideas, I don't think the big ideas, at least today, are going to serve you very well. You have to ask yourself, on what basis do these big ideas exist? Well, the big ideas fundamentally exist on the basis of facts, because there is a contradiction, not a contradiction, a clash between ideas and facts. Facts of a low-level stuff, ideas of a high-level stuff. And today you need to focus on the low-level stuff, making sure all of the ideas are in order, and considering the possibility that some facts are incorrect, you've got them wrong, and if the facts fall, then the ideas fall. So, if possible, Aquarius, try to have a grounded day, and don't make commitments. If someone asks you to do something, particularly of a social nature, it's probably a good idea to say no or to postpone. Remember, tomorrow, the moon goes into Aquarius, your sign. Things are going to be much easier when the moon goes into Aquarius. You're going to have a clearer idea about what you want to do, and I think you're going to be more effective. So that's another reason why a little bit of patience might be required. Pisces, you're able to get your message across very well. It's same as yesterday. So yesterday I pointed out that Jupiter was aspecting the Mercury-Mars midpoint. Well, Jupiter is still aspecting the Mercury-Mars midpoint, and Jupiter is your ruler. And this does mean that Pisceans are able to bring the full force of their personality to bear in terms of what they are saying. Of course, Mercury is retrograde. So with Mercury in retrograde, you do have to be careful what you say. There is the possibility of making a fool of yourself, yes. If you get too excited about things which have no basis in reality. So Pisces, do consider that possibility. But Mercury retrograde is not the end of the world, and if you are sure of your facts, then I think it's okay to really push these ideas out into the open, and with energy and force, even with a little bit of aggression. So perhaps what you need to do is, before you push your message, just do a little bit of research, perhaps on the internet. Just really make sure that you have got it right. And once you have discovered that you have got it right, then you can just go for it. And you will be helped by the fact that the moon, moving through Capricorn, is making a trine aspect to Jupiter. And of course, Jupiter is your ruler, so you've got the moon making a trine to Jupiter. And this underlines the fact that you really are able to get your message across loud and clear. People will get it, and there's really no need to spend too much time explaining yourself. Just say what you want to have to say. Yeah, explanations. If you spend too much time explaining, then you might weaken your overall force. Just say it as it is. And with Moon trine Jupiter, I think that your social life and your connections with colleagues and associates can go very well. So don't be afraid of trying to get in contact with people, because I think that your efforts to get in contact with people will work, even though Mercury is retrograde. Now, from a one-to-one perspective, you still have to take into account the fact that Mercury is retrograde. From a Piscean perspective, Mercury rules Virgo, so Mercury has a special connection in the Piscean chart with one-to-one relationships. So certain people are going to be indecisive, and they may not want to commit, and you can accept this, you can understand their perspective, but you have to perhaps consider what is the basis of their indecision. And if you want to make it easier for people, make it clear that there isn't a desperate hurry, that they've got time. And if you tell people they've got time, in a way that might have the opposite effect. You think that if you tell someone they've got time, then they will follow the cue and just take more time to make decisions. But if you tell someone they've got time, that there's no hurry, that might actually relax them and enable them to make faster decisions, strange as it might sound. So perhaps if you're a Piscean salesperson, it might actually be a good day, but you've got to think about the ethical dimension. Just because you can get someone to make a decision and to sign on a dotted line doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. So Pisces, you have to use your sensitivity to understand what is right in any particular situation. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and I now want to look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. And when I asked the question, what is today, Tuesday, going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video, I got a single hexagram. It doesn't move. And the single hexagram I got was hexagram 18, illness. Illness is a translation used by Greg Winkup in his version of the I Ching. The Wilhelm version of the I Ching calls it work on what has been spoilt, but I kind of think that illness is more appropriate. Now, don't panic when you see this word illness. I'm not saying that you're going to get ill today. It's not about that. And the I Ching sees illness in terms of something that needs to be fixed. And it's not likely to be physical illness. It's about something that has been neglected, but perhaps needs repair. It may have been something that has been neglected not by you, but by someone else, even past generations. And so illness is something very much that today you can sort out and repair. So consider what that is. So look at today and what you're planning on doing today, and ask yourself, what's going wrong? What's not working out? Now, you may take the view that there's nothing you can do about it, that you've tried your best and that's the way it is. I don't think that would necessarily be the right approach, because where you see illness, you see the possibility of recovering from an illness. The Wilhelm translation of this hexagram was, working on what has been spoiled. So something has been spoiled, something is in a state of decay, and that is something you need to address yourself to, and you need to sort it out. And that is definitely something you can do. So don't just give up on something. Just work out what needs to be done to fix the problem. We do get an idea about the underlying issue if we look at the nuclear hexagram. So the nuclear hexagram is, when you take off the top and bottom lines, and you take the top 3 lines here and the bottom 3 lines here, and we can actually create a nuclear hexagram. And this gives us an idea about the underlying issue. And the underlying issue might be about 54, about the marrying maiden. The marrying maiden as perhaps about someone being in too much of a hurry to get involved with something. But it's the maiden who wants to get married, and she's in a hurry, and it's getting involved in something that is inappropriate. It's not necessarily about relationships, but it's just being in too much of a hurry to make a connection. And maybe this is what the problem is actually about, with the marrying maiden being the nuclear hexagram, the underlying issue. Because I suppose that's it. When you've got an illness, you want to know what is the underlying problem. You don't want to just treat the symptoms. And so the underlying problem may be about having got involved in a situation too quickly. You didn't know what you were getting involved in, and that has caused problems. And so what perhaps has to be done with this hexagram 18 illness is you have to consider this underlying situation that someone got involved with, someone made a commitment in the past. It may have been years ago, decades ago, and it's gone wrong. And perhaps now you have to untangle yourself from this commitment, this involvement. And once you remove it, then you will have removed the fundamental problem behind the illness, and then perhaps sooner rather than later, the symptoms of the illness will start to reduce and the illness will be cured. Finally, I want to go back to the astrology, and I want to consider the horoscope or horoscopes relating to the United Kingdom, because I'm told that the United Kingdom is falling apart. I haven't been to the United Kingdom for 5 years, so I'm perhaps a bit out of touch. And I want to start with the chart of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on December the 21st, 2020, and I think it was at 6:20 p.m. set for London. And this chart has the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction exactly on the descendant. So remember, this is a chart for the precise time of Jupiter and Saturn's conjunction, the exact time it happened. And the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is really about what's happening in the world in a fairly long-term sense. So Jupiter and Saturn are the chronocrators, the rulers of time. So when you've got Jupiter and Saturn coming together, it is the end of one thing, the beginning of the other. And this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is a great mutation conjunction. It's the first conjunction in an air sign. And now there's going to be a run of Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in air signs. And I know that there was a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in the early 1980s, around 1981, where we had, which was in Libra. But then in 2000, we had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Taurus. So that was in an earth sign, like the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 1960. But with this conjunction in 2020, the run has started now. We're now solidly in Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions in air signs, and arguably this this chart is not just about the next 20 years, because you get Jupiter-Saturn conjunction every 20 years, but it's about the next few centuries potentially. So it is important. And when you see Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on the descendant, this may give us the idea of the sun setting, or Jupiter-Saturn setting. The sun perhaps setting on the British Empire. Okay, I know that the sun has set on the British Empire quite a long time ago, but this may be the sort of final nail in the coffin of Britain and its empire and its illusions of empire and grandeur and superiority. So that is a possibility, and it may indicate that Britain in its current form is maybe coming to an end. Now, I do understand that there are other places that have Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions on the descendant at the time that this happened. So, for example, if we could relocate this chart for Paris, same time, but just different location, Paris. You can see for Paris, Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is on the descendant as well. So maybe at some level the United Kingdom and France are going through similar experiences. I know there's this great rivalry between the United Kingdom and France, and with France it's got its obsession with empire, and recently, the last few months, France has had a huge loss of influence in North Africa. It's often said, or it's been said, that North African former colonies of France were almost its hidden empire that continued, even though theoretically these countries had been given their independence. But now a lot of these countries are now wanting to break from France. And so, from a French perspective, this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction might also be an end of empire, a final nail in the coffin of French imperial ambitions. But I don't really want to talk about France. I do want to talk about the United Kingdom, and this 0 degrees 20 this conjunction 0 degrees 29 Aquarius, where the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction happened, it did hit some other charts. So let us look at the Queen, the former Queen, who died in, I think, 2022. So Queen Elizabeth II. This is her chart set for April 21st, 1926. And you can see that she has the Sun at 0 degrees 12 minutes Taurus. So this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was exactly square the Queen's Sun. So I think that may be important. And okay, she was an old woman, so she was going to die at a certain stage, but her death may have been particularly significant in terms of perhaps the end of empire. Remember, this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was in Aquarius, and Aquarius is very much about the East. This Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is about power passing from the West to the East, and perhaps the UK is really quite in the middle of it, particularly with reference to its current support for this war in Ukraine, which is going very badly for the West. Going back to this 0 degrees fixed point, we can look at King Charles's chart. King Charles has his moon at 0 degrees Taurus. So Charles's moon is exactly where the Queen's sun is. So, in other words, the Queen gave birth when the moon was exactly on her sun. And again, this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020 was square the King's moon. And we now have the King having this diagnosis of cancer of the prostate. So what is the relevance of that for Britain? So what? I mean, he's just a constitutional monarch. Well, one of my favourite films is Excalibur, early 80s, talking about the Arthurian myths. And there's a quotation from this film where Arthur asks Merlin about what it means to be king. And Merlin said to Arthur, "You will be the land, and the land will be you. If you fail, the land will perish. As you thrive, the land will blossom." So the king and the land are associated. Now, in the case of Excalibur and the Arthurian myths, it was Arthur's mistakes which led to his country going to rack and ruin. But it works both ways. It's not Charles's fault what's going on in the UK, but when the land goes to rack and ruin, potentially the king is affected, and so the king has been diagnosed with cancer of the prostate. So you could then say, with this logic, that as he's the head of state, the king, the United Kingdom also has cancer of the prostate. You have to work that through symbolically. And that links back with this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. It is a sign, perhaps, of a country that is maybe falling to pieces. And perhaps it's because the country can't fully recognize the change of power, that power is moving away from the West. It's moving perhaps towards the BRIC nations, perhaps to Russia and China. It's moving east. And this is perhaps what the war in Ukraine reflects. And you can link this dynastically. So the current dynasty ruling Britain, the ruling dynasty is the Windsors. But the Windsors, the reason it's the Windsors, they changed their name in 1917 because Britain was at war with Germany. And it used to be the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. But really, the royal house that rules Britain is the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, which changed its name to Windsor in 1917. So the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha came into being at the moment of the death of Queen Victoria on September the 8th, that's the death of the current Queen. Victoria's death, it's January the 22nd, 1901, which was at 6:30 p.m. on the Isle of Wight. And so when Queen Victoria died in 1901, the sun was at 2 degrees 5 Aquarius. So the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in December 2020 was right on Queen Victoria's sun. So I think there's an idea that dynasty is under threat. Of course, the dynasty is unlikely to stop, but it's all about Britain. It's not just about the royal family. It's about the dynasty reflecting the country. The dynasty, when the dynasty struggles, the country struggles. When the country struggles, the dynasty struggles. So from a medieval perspective of kingship, this kind of makes sense. And remembering this 0 degrees fixed concept, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was at 0 degrees Aquarius in 2020. The Prime Minister at the time was, of course, Boris Johnson. And Boris Johnson has his moon at 0 degrees 36 Scorpio. And that's not what we see with Boris. We see Boris as being this happy, optimistic Gemini, full of ideas, optimism about his country, but it's the moon in Scorpio which we don't see. It's the moon in Scorpio which is the darkness of Boris, the unpleasantness of Boris. And that moon in Scorpio was opposition Queen Elizabeth II's son. It is opposition King Charles III's, then he was Prince Charles III, but it was being aspected by the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020 was exactly square Boris's moon. And arguably, that's when Boris really came unstuck. Because we say, it was Partygate that did for Boris, wasn't it? I forget what year Partygate was. Was it 2021? But the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was really problematic for Boris. And if you look at Boris's moon, one of the key things about Boris's moon, which I've talked about recently, is the fact that if you relocate Boris's chart if you relocate the chart to Kiev, I mean, I've done this before, but just one more time. If we relocate Boris's chart to Kiev, then he has moon exactly on the midheaven. So that moon in Scorpio is really associated with Ukraine. And so what has this got to do with, like, a curse being on Britain? Well, Britain went a long way towards encouraging this war in Ukraine. And in particular, Boris. Boris wanted to stand up to the Russians. Boris went to Kiev, I think in April 2022, to encourage the Ukrainians to continue with the war, I believe, and in the light of the fact that there were peace negotiations in Istanbul between Ukrainians and Russians, which had pretty much were complete. It was a pretty good deal the Ukrainians had, actually. And if there had been peace at that time, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian lives would have been saved. And so you could argue that that's part of the curse that the UK is now under, because so many people died because of pressure on Ukraine. And what was symbolic of that pressure was Boris going to Kiev, and there he is, his moon in Scorpio conjunct the midheaven. I think that is all part of it. At least that is my opinion, because we're trying to understand why things are going so badly wrong for the UK. And when people die, when a lot of people die, that is, I don't like to use the word karma, but it's kind of bad karma for the country, isn't it? I mean, it's got to be. And perhaps it's a culmination of all the suffering that has been caused by the British Empire. And I mean, I'm not saying that history is not good or bad. History just is. But perhaps the karma of the British Empire is finally catching up with Britain, and perhaps this is what the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is all about. And the British Empire is sort of Anglo-Saxon control over the world. It's passing, and as a sign of its passing is perhaps a curse coming onto Britain. That may be the way it's working, and Boris was perhaps very much part of this curse. And another prime minister, the current prime minister, is Rishi Sunak. He was born May the 12th, 1980. We do not have a time of birth for Rishi Sunak. And Rishi Sunak, though, has Sun-Mercury conjunction in Taurus, opposition Uranus, and right now that Sun-Mercury conjunction in Taurus, opposition Uranus, is being smashed to bits by Uranus. So by transiting Uranus, that's happening in April. It happens to a lesser extent later in the year. So Britain has chosen a prime minister who's got all this stuff in fixed signs, and Uranus is really hitting it. And so again, a country that is on a decline is choosing another bad prime minister. I mean, Boris could have actually been quite a good prime minister if he was if he was perhaps able to think for himself. But as soon as he becomes prime minister, he becomes a tool of destiny. Destiny had a purpose for Boris, and Boris was perhaps part of the destruction of the United Kingdom in its present form. Rishi Sunak, perhaps not as extreme, because we don't have that moon at 0 degrees Taurus being hit by that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020. But still, he's got the Sun-Mercury conjunction in Taurus, opposition Uranus, square the North Node. And Uranus is hitting this whole thing, and this is our Prime Minister. Okay. But there'll be an election, won't there? And Keir Starmer apparently is going to win this election. I'm not saying it astrologically. Every single polling organisation in the UK is saying that the Labour is guaranteed pretty much to win the next election. So that would mean, short of there being a mishap, that Keir Starmer is guaranteed to be Britain's next Prime Minister almost. Remember, I'm not using astrology for this. So here is Keir Starmer's chart. I don't have a time of birth for Keir Starmer. So September the 2nd, 1962. He's just had a lot of Saturn transits, but Saturn is moving away from his opposition to the Sun-Pluto conjunction. But is it going to be any better for him in the end? In a year or two's time, he will have Saturn moving into Aries. It's going to be opposition his Venus, Moon and Mercury. Also, we have to consider Keir Starmer's solar arc directions. So just a few solar arc... So Keir Starmer, I did some Keir Starmer's solar arc... There we are. So that's Keir Starmer's chart in the middle. I don't have a time of birth, remember, so this is a bit vague, but, it's within a year or two. So certainly within maybe 6 months. So on the outer wheel, we've got Keir Starmer's solar arc directions. So Keir Starmer's solar arc directed Mars, he's got his natal Mars at 6 degrees 6 degrees Cancer. His natal Mars is currently about 2 degrees off his Sun-Pluto conjunction. So in a year or two's time, Keir Starmer is going to have Mars conjunct his Sun-Pluto conjunction. That will happen exactly after he's become Prime Minister. And so that's something for Keir Starmer to look forward to, perhaps. His solar arc directed Sun is at 10-7 Scorpio. So in about a year's time, he's going to have Sun conjunct Neptune. That'll be when he's Prime Minister. So as he moves into number 10 Downing Street, assuming the pollsters are right, I'm not using astrology, he's got some very difficult solar arc directions coming up. Neptune on his Sun. Sun on his Neptune. Mars on his Sun-Pluto conjunction. Is this the kind of Prime Minister you want? Okay, we don't have a time of birth for him, but we can see the trouble that Keir Starmer is going to be in the moment he becomes Prime Minister. And, Keir Starmer is not someone who's got any great charisma. Britain again has lined up a load of leaders who just, after Boris, yes, Boris was charismatic, but Keir Starmer doesn't have the charisma to create a new departure for Britain. So I think, further evidence that Britain is perhaps going to be going into decline, and it's all connected with that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. It all started. The key point was that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. I think that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction called time on Britain. One other chart I very quickly wanted to look at was Meghan's chart. I mean, she plays a small role. I mean, she's not a major actor, but she's got her North Node and at 1 degree 39 Leo, and her South Node at 1 degree 39 Aquarius. So that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was on her South Node, on her nodal axis. And so perhaps in some small way, Meghan was part of the decline of Britain. Not directly, but I suppose through her influence, she helped undermine the monarchy a bit. I don't think she did the Queen's health any much good. If Meghan had never existed, I suspect the Queen would have lived for a little bit longer, don't you think? Probably. I don't know. Stress has an impact on it. So yes, so Meghan played a little bit of a role in it. But That's a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. I did want to mention it again. I suppose I'm being a bit controversial here, associating the monarchy with the country. And I'm taking a very medieval concept here. But I think you could argue that Prince Charles, as king, being diagnosed with cancer of the prostate, is saying something about the country. And maybe at some level it is true that the United Kingdom is suffering from prostate cancer, and you can sort of symbolically work out what that might mean. Okay, thank you for listening to me ramble. I hope you didn't find that too excruciating, and if by any off chance you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed, I would be grateful if you were to subscribe, and if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So yes, thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.